So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us, and I'd like to introduce Don York, Director of IT, Cancer Therapy and Research at Texas Health Science Center, San Antonio.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate you joining us today as we talk about identity access management. I hope that this is beneficial to you and to your organization. What I'd like to do today is give you a real quick overview of CTRC and who we are so you kind of understand the context of where we're coming from. I'll describe what our clinical IT environment was like and talk a little bit about challenges that we faced because of that environment. Talk a little bit about our requirements for a solution, the strategy that we implemented, and then talk about how we actually went about the implementation of the solution. Then I'll give you a demonstration. I'll take you into our actual production system and show you how the system works. Then we'll talk just briefly on some of the keys to success, and then I'll describe where we are today 2 years later and what some of our next steps are on the horizon. And then there'll be plenty of time for question and answers afterwards. So just a quick overview of who we are. The Cancer Therapy Research Center, we opened in 1974 as a nonprofit to provide cancer therapies to San Antonio and South Texas. We are a multidisciplinary cancer center. We provide radiation oncology, medical oncology, and surgical oncology to our patients. In 1991, we launched the Institute for Drug Development, or IDD as we call it, to develop new cancer treatments. And in 2007, we merged with the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio. We are an NCI-designated cancer center, one of 65, and one of only 3 in Texas, the other 2 being Baylor College of Medicine and MD Anderson in Houston. We are an academic research treatment facility, the only one in South Texas, and we serve a population of 4.4 million people, primarily in the growth corridor that exists between Austin, San Antonio, Corpus Christi, and Laredo. We have about 120,000 patient visits every year, and at any given time, we generally have about 600 patients enrolled in clinical studies. We are one of the world's largest phase 1 clinical study programs. We also do preclinical, phase 2, phase 3, but by far the largest percentage is phase 1 clinical studies. And just an interesting note, 15 of the most recently FDA-approved cancer drugs were either developed or tested here at CTRC. So a little bit about the clinical IT environment that existed. Because we are a multidisciplinary cancer center, we utilize best-of-breed applications to treat our patients. The primary application that's kind of the core of everything that we did here was Mosaic. That is an application by a company called Impact. It's our EMR system, but it's a lot more than that. It actually interfaces with our linear accelerators to deliver radiation treatments to our patients. It's a very complex system, has a lot of interfaces with planning and other systems, and that's kind of the core of what we have here. Our laboratory system is Harvest by a company called Orchard. We have a client side in the lab, it's called Harvest, and then there's a web version called WebLab, and that's what exists in the clinic, and that's what the physicians and clinicians use to order lab tests and to review the results. Our PAC system is eFilm, and our pharmacy system is Ascend High. So these kind of make up the core of what our clinical IT environment looks like.
Excuse me, who did you say your PAC system was?
It's eFilm by Burge.
And your pharmacy system?
Is Ascend High. That's by a company called Hands-On, which I think was recently acquired. So because we have these multiple systems, we obviously had multiple user IDs and passwords. And this presented obvious challenges because the clinicians had to remember all of their various IDs and passwords, not only for these systems, but for other systems as well. And when I say remember those passwords, I know you all know what I'm talking about, when what that really means is they wrote them down on the back of their ID badge, and they had them in their notebooks and on sticky notes and, you know, everywhere else that you could think of. And that, of course, spawned a lot of calls to the help desk to reset passwords. We found that people tried to get around the system by sharing logins, which obviously created a lot of security and PHI concerns. It resulted in a lot of redundant patient queries. If a clinician wanted to look up information on John Doe in one system, they would have to look up or repeat that query in all the subsequent systems to get the information that they're looking for. We did have resource constraints. We're a relatively small IT shop, so we didn't have a lot of budget dollars or HL7 expertise, for example, in order to address a lot of these issues. So what we needed identity and access management. We needed something that was going to provide our clinicians a quick, easy way to obtain all this information across the multiple systems. We needed to share context and have a simple sign-on. And if we were going to do that, we had certain requirements. It had to be low cost. Our IT budget was very minimal. We didn't have a lot of money to spend. It had to be something easy to maintain. As I mentioned, we were a relatively small shop, so we didn't have a lot of staff to support it. Because of that, we were going to rely heavily upon our vendors. So we knew that the vendor was going to have to provide really good support, and it had to work with Mosaic. And this was probably my number one concern going into this project. As I mentioned before, Mosaic is a very complex system with a lot of pieces and parts. And my experience had been that because it is such a large system, we had challenges trying to get it to work with other systems. Felt like if somebody could come in and make this solution work with Mosaic, then that in itself would be a home run for us. And we were also faced with a very aggressive timeline. So enter the Carefx Imprivata solution. The director that preceded me, David Hachias, he was at the 2007 HIMSS conference in New Orleans. And it was really kind of a chance meeting. He was literally kind of on his way out the door on the last day when he ran into some of the representatives from Carefx. And David started talking about what our situation was. And they started talking about Carefx's Fusion FX product and some of the things that it might be able to do for us. So David came back and talked to me a little bit about it. I contacted Carefx, and we had some conference calls. I attended some webinars very similar to what we're doing right now, had some demos, and Carefx had teamed up with Imprivata, and they brought to us a comprehensive solution that they thought could be done within our timeline. So the strategy that we started out with was we would have Carefx's Fusion FX product to share context between the clinical applications. Imprivata would provide the single sign-on and the biometric services, and we all felt that we could do this within our 90-day timeline. Now, aside from that, internally, we had already decided that we wanted to move to a remote desktop environment using terminal servers. We needed to standardize our desktop, and we were going to roll out thin clients into some of the exam rooms, triage areas, and in the common physician workroom areas. And we also used Barracuda as a load balancer so that when people logged into the terminal server, it would balance across the 5 servers where they would go. And whatever we did, we knew that we had to, at a minimum, complement our workflows and hopefully enhance those workflows. So that was our strategy going into it. And this project was executed in a manner similar to any other IT project that I'm sure you guys conduct. We had our planning phase, implementation phase, and development phases. We began working with all of the users, explaining what this solution was, obtaining their buy-in, setting their expectations. We had a kickoff meeting with all the parties. We worked with Carefx on a detailed project plan, which is something that we feel is very important to make a project successful. Carefx provided us with a project plan. We went through several iterations till we felt like we had something that we thought could work. And, of course, we had a series of planning meetings with our stakeholders and subject matter experts. We moved into the development phase. Imprivata and Carefx both came on site. Imprivata was here for about 3 days, and basically they worked with our hardware team to set up the single sign-on appliances. They went through and set up all the appliances so that they would recognize the login screen. You train the system on how to recognize specific screens, how to behave when login screens appear, that type of thing. So they went through and did all of that, and then they trained our IT staff on how to manage the system once they had left. Carefx was on site. They made quite a few trips for 1 to 2 weeks at a time. They would visit in the clinics. They spent a lot of time working with us, analyzing the various workflows so that they understood how things flowed through the clinics. and then they would develop and test the applications. A lot of the development work was done remotely, but quite a bit of it was done here on site as well. So once we got to a point where we thought that it was ready, of course, we're doing extensive testing within IT ourselves, but once we felt like it was ready, we launched a pilot test. We had about 10 users initially, a couple of physicians in the medical oncology clinic, several nurses, a few people in the triage area and in the pharmacy area. And they went through for about a 2-week period utilizing the system, providing us feedback, and that resulted in some changes and some tweaks and enhancements in the system. Then we expanded that pilot test. We added about 20 additional users, and we brought in additional clinics. We brought in the laboratory, some of the research staff, and the medical record staff, and we conducted this expanded pilot test for about another 2 weeks. By that time, we felt like we were pretty much ready for prime time, so we held training sessions for all of our clinical staff. Those training sessions, we had probably 8 to 10 people per session, and they were anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. Once we were ready to go live, Carefx was on site with us. They were here to help us answer questions, work through any issues that came up during the go live. At the end of the 90-day window, we had achieved all of our objectives. We had our standard desktop that we had needed to have using the remote desktop protocol. We had single sign-on for all the clinical applications. We had contact sharing between the clinical applications. We had indeed enhanced our workflow, and time savings were realized. We had a lot of very positive feedback from physicians and other clinicians. You know, the physicians would tell us that if we could save even just a few clicks per application, that would translate to them to, 1 or 2 hours gained by the end of the day where they could focus on other things. So they really appreciated this application. And of course, it gave us better security as well. So what I'd like to do now is take you into the actual system. You should all be seeing the login screen for the Windows Terminal server. And I'm going to log in here. And we are in our production system. I'm only going to be using test patients, though. And the first thing that you'll notice is that you see like 8 of the same icons on one side. And that's to explain why that is. Mosaic, our EMR system, actually is department-driven. So because we have a multidisciplinary clinic, we have to have these different icons so that people can log in based on their clinic. And there's other icons on here which I'm going to speak to in just a minute. But I want you to notice, you have to watch quickly. As it comes up, you'll see the login screen, and it automatically put in my name and my password. That was the Imprivata single sign-on appliance, recognizing the EMR system and putting in my login and password. The other applications I'm going to show you is a web lab. Same thing, very quickly. If you blink, you miss it. It logged me in. And same thing on our PAC system. I'll bring that up. And it's got me logged in there. So now I've gone into the terminal server. I've launched our 3 primary clinical applications, and I did not have to log in or enter a password in any of them. I'm going to go back to our primary application, Mosaic, and I'm going to pull up one of our test patients here, which is Mr. Duck, and you'll see up here in the top center portion where my mouse is, I've got Daffy Duck there. And if I click over to the web lab system, you'll see that I also have the record up for Daffy Duck, and I've got his lab here. And if I come over to the PAC system, you'll see that I have Mr. Daffy Duck's record there as well. I can double click on that. You should be seeing it pull up the PACS image for Mr. Duck. You should be seeing his scan. So if I'm a physician, I've entered Mr. Duck's record in one application, and it's brought up his records in all 3 applications. So I can click back and forth between the different applications. I can pull up the laboratory record, I can be looking here at his laboratory results. I can click back over, be looking at his images. I can click back over to the EMR system if I need to pull up vital signs or assessments or dictated documents. It's all right there. If I'm in one application, it doesn't matter where I am. If I decide that, well, I need to look up a different patient, going from the web lab here, I'm going to pull up some of our test patients here. And let's say I want to look at Mr. Dudley Dewright. I want to look at his lab record. Well, in the background, you'll see in the PAC system, we also have Mr. Dudley Dewright. And in the EMR system, I'm going to catch up here, we also have, you'll see up here in the top center, Mr. Dudley Dewright. So all three applications pulled up the record for the same patient. I didn't have to enter anything except that initial patient lookup. That's pretty much how this works for the clinical applications. There's some other applications here that are outside of our clinic. For example, at the top here, top left here, you'll see Synapse, and at the lower left, you'll see UHF. These are actually EMR systems for some of our partner clinics. Synapse is used at the VA hospital across the street. UHS Clinical Inquiry is used at University Hospital, which is also across the street. We have patients that come over here from both those locations. And so what we've done is we've added these to our desktops so that physicians, if they have a login for those systems, we can utilize the single sign-on for them as well. Now, we can't share context because they're not our apps, so we can't develop the application extensions for them because they're outside of our domain. But we can save the physician some keystrokes by having them, when they launch these apps, it will automatically put in their login and password. We also have Documentum here, which is not a clinical application, but is often used to retrieve various files and records for patient education, etc. So we have that as part of this so that you'll notice it automatically logged me in when I brought it up. So we're utilizing it for clinical as well as non-clinical, single sign-on, and context. You'll notice I was able to, in just one keystroke, lock this screen. That's one of the functions of the single sign-on appliance. Rather than having to do Control-Alt-Delete or use the Windows Terminal Server logout function, I can hit the F4 key, and it locks me out. It saves my session. If I need to come back in, I can either enter my password here, I can use the biometric device if there's one attached, or you'll notice here it's got the Imprivata login icon, and it's got to help me log in. Let's say, for example, I'm having an issue with my password, maybe the biometric device is not attached. I can click on the Help Me Log In. It'll ask me one of my security questions, and it'll put me right back into the desktop. That's one of the features of the single sign-on. So just a couple of keys to the successful implementation. They're not much different from keys that you would utilize for any other IT project. We made sure that the end users and the subject matter experts were involved as much as possible. We made sure that we included medical records, laboratory, pharmacy staff, some of the folks that you don't always think of, but you need to make sure they're included. We needed to make sure that the users understood the benefits and that we set realistic expectations for them. Understanding the workflows is critical. You need to understand them from the perspective of the end user. A lot of times, supervisors and managers may think they know what the workflow is, but when you actually talk to the people that are in the trenches every day, you find out that the workflows are very different. So you need to make sure that you include them, that you understand what those workflows are. Plan for potential roadblocks. You have to expect the unexpected. In our case, we had a merger that was kind of thrown on top of us, had built up a lot of full head of steam. We were ready to go live, and then this merger occurred. and we had the potential for derailing everything, but we kept our momentum, and we were successful because of it. Keep the staff up to date. Every Friday morning, I would send out an email update to the staff so that they knew exactly where we were on the project, what had been accomplished that week, what was coming up the next week. And the staff really appreciated that. It kept them in the loop, made them feel like they understood what was going on and they were, part of the project. Of course, you have to test and provide excellent training. So where are we today, 2 years later? Well, the system has been active since 2007, and it continues to work very well, as was demonstrated. Haven't made any changes to the application since we implemented them in 2007. We did merge with the University of Texas Health Science Center at the time of go live, and all the original leadership and sponsorship for this project is no longer here. And the only reason I mention that is because I think it's a good testament to the quality and the importance of this application. A lot of things could have happened, but they didn't. The clinicians understood and appreciated the value of this application. So despite a lot of the folks no longer being here, the application lives on. Because we are an academic training institute, we do have a lot of changeover. We have a lot of residents, fellows, a lot of people that are here for 6 months and then they're gone. And one thing we found is that this application really helps in that process, because once we get them registered in the system and set up, it makes it very easy for them to navigate the system. The biometrics, we found that in the clinic environment, they're not really used that much anymore. Our clinicians had issues with gloves. They didn't like having to put them on and off all the time. Now the biometrics, they do continue to be used in some areas, physician workrooms, for example, some of the physicians' private offices, but in the clinics, not so much. We did implement Epic recently in May 2008 for registration and billing, which kind of changed the landscape a little bit, and that's going to continue to change here in the next 6 months to a year. So some of the next steps we have, we need to grow our terminal server farm. We currently have about 5 terminal servers. As more and more people come on board, we need to increase that. Training is an issue for us. We are a small shop, as I've mentioned several times. And now that we have such a transient group of clinicians, currently working on putting some online training using some applications that I've found so that people can access them 24/7 from our internet. We are looking at implementing additional Epic modules. Beacon is an oncology EMR. We have a project set up for about November to start doing some evaluations there. And when that occurs, we will plan to activate the eCal, which is native to Epic, so that the Epic modules will be enabled for contact sharing with the other applications. So that's kind of where we've been and where we're going.
Hi, this is Debbie from Scottsdale Healthcare. Ultimately, how many users did your implementation include?
Total users, probably about 250 users, probably.
Hi, this is Mike from Trinity Health. I have a question. Does the solution work remotely the same way it does within the hospital, for instance, from home or from a physician office?
We provide remote access a couple of different ways. We use Juniper VPN for a lot of our staff here, and when they utilize the VPN, they can come in and launch the terminal server application exactly the way that I showed in the demonstration. So everything works exactly the same way through the terminal server. So we utilize a Juniper VPN. We also have a separate secure, kind of a standalone terminal server. If everything else fails, it's another way to get in, and we have it configured the same way. Regardless of which path they come in, they're able to utilize the single sign-on and the contact sharing.
How do you support remote users on PCs that you don't manage?
We do support them from the standpoint that we will help them through the internet access with the VPN. We will provide them support on that, help them gain the access, log in, and launch the application. Our help desk staff here will do that, and they have done that on a number of occasions. We have physicians that travel quite a bit, both within the States and in Europe, and they have provided that support.
Are you only running SSO on the terminal servers, or are you also running it on the local workstations?
We do both. There are some areas, physicians' offices, for example, where you know how physicians, sometimes they just want things the way they want them, no matter what. And so we do have some of these things running locally on a few machines. Rather than going through the terminal server, they are able to do it from their desktop. But the lion's share, the large majority of access is through the terminal server.
John, how were you able to achieve the 90-day deployment?
Well, a lot of hard work. We did, I think, a pretty good job planning up front, where we laid out everything, set the expectations. Everybody pretty much understood their roles and what had to be done. Carefx and Imprivata were very supportive of that 90-day window. My team worked very hard to get terminal server, all the technical stuff that we needed to do, having that ready, and then providing the support for the developers at Carefx. It was very much a group effort. Everybody performed exceptionally well. We just did it.
How did the end-user community respond to the solution? Were they resistant, or were they pleased with the change?
They were very pleased, and that was most evident during the training session. You meet with the people and you explain to them, what it is that we're wanting to do, and I think, intellectually they understand and they think, yeah, that sounds pretty good. But until they sat down in those training sessions and we took them through and they actually saw how they could log into the remote desktop, and each time they launched an app, it was logging them in. We would have them go through as part of the training. We would have them launch each of the clinical apps and then pull up one of the test patients. I mean, every single time they clicked on another app and saw the patient record already there, that's where we hear all the oohs and ahs and, oh, that's cool, and, you see the smiles on the faces. I think that's when it really clicked, what this was going to do for them. And they were very excited about it. And then, of course, as we moved from the training environment down into the actual clinic, they were very excited about the application and certainly understood the benefits.
For the single sign-on, did the product have to learn the user's sign-on information and password?
It works off of the Active Directory, tying into that. Yes, it has to learn the different screens, and whenever it sees a particular login screen, it says, okay, this is the EMR login screen. It looks up the person in the database and says, okay, either this person is registered or not registered, and if they're not registered, it'll say, I want to capture your credentials. So the person logs in their username and their password, and then the appliance captures those credentials, so now it knows who that person is, and it knows how to respond the next time that login screen appears. So it does go through a learning process.
Did you have the users do that during the training sessions, or how
Yes.
did you help them through that?
Yes, we did that through the training session. That was part of the training where they registered their logins with each of the applications. I showed you where it had that help me log in screen where it asked me the security question. That's part of the registration process where you go through and it learns your logins, but it also allows you to set up, I think it's 3 different security questions that you pick from a drop-down, much like your online banking and that kind of thing. You go in and you select a question, type in your answer, and then it's there from then on. That was all part of the training.
So there's no password associated with logins? They're all questions?
It remembers your login and your password, but in the event that you come to a login screen and maybe for whatever reason you can't log in, like to the terminal server, for example, you can click on that Help Me Log In, and it'll prompt you with a security question. It's a way to help you to get in the event you can't log in.
If you have systems that has an automated password change every
Right.
90 days or every 60 days, whatever,
Right.
what impact is that going to have upon the user?
Imprivata has that covered. Basically, that's one of the screens that you train the appliance to recognize. so that if that screen comes up and says, your password is about to expire, you need to change it, then it knows what that screen is, and it captures your credentials as you type in your new password.
That's on the Imprivata side.
Correct.
What if it's on the, we'll call it a third-party application?
If you set up Imprivata to recognize that application, then you will train it to know what those password change screens look like. So when that third-party app says, hey, it's time to change your password, Imprivata recognizes that screen and says, oh, this application is telling the user that they need to change their password. So when they change their
Changing the
password
in that particular application, not necessarily in all of them.
Correct.
Since you had to integrate SSO and contact management, was it difficult working with Carefx and Imprivata, the two vendors?
It was not. That's something I think a lot of people kind of worry about anytime you have, multiple vendors. You fear that you might get into a situation where you have the finger pointing kind of deal. That never happened. They worked very well together. I don't know if we were the first time or not, but they worked very, very well together. From our perspective, it was pretty much like having one vendor. They did whatever they needed to do behind the scenes, and when they were on site, Imprivata set up the appliances, did what they needed to do. Carefx was doing their thing. Interaction was great. I can honestly say we never had an issue where finger pointing kind of thing, and if we had a problem, it got resolved. It was very good working with them.
I have a question about the reported project results. You had mentioned that after the 90-day window that you had results, among other things, of enhanced workflow and time saving realized by clinicians. And I was wondering how that was measured, how both those things were measured.
The workflow enhancements was because the actual, we were able to eliminate a lot of the processes just by virtue of not having to sign on and do the multiple queries and that type of thing. As far as the time savings, that was pretty much what was reported back to us by nursing staff, physicians, primarily those two, in terms of what they felt like they were gaining by using this application. We didn't do a time measurement study, quantify it. It was based on the feedback that they provided us.
I'd like to take this time to thank everybody for joining us and thank Don for putting on such an interesting teleconference.